Welcome to Talking Tuesday. I am your host, Fancy Quant, and today I am super excited. We are bringing on Josh Starmer, who is the founder, YouTuber, creator of StatQuest. So lots of awesome videos around statistics and machine learning. So I'm, fanboying out a little bit here because I actually use his videos as references when I teach others, and when I need a quick refresher or there's a new topic or need something I need to look up quickly, I run onto YouTube and I look at his videos because they are so clear and so easy to use. Before we dive in though to this awesome interview with him, I'm just gonna pitch it for him. I bought the book, so he has a book. It's the StatQuest Illustrated Guide to Machine Learning. Triple bam. Anyways. It is awesome. It is great. It is an illustrated guide. I think it is the only stats book I have ever seen that actually takes this approach. I think it is far easier to learn many of the ideas and concepts in machine learning. So I would highly recommend you buy this book as well. I'm going to put it in the description below, though. There's a little link to it if you are interested in buying it. But without further ado, let's dive into the interview. All right, so welcome to the channel, Josh. I'm excited to have you. For those of you that don't know, Josh is the creator, owner, designer of StatsQuest, which is one of my all-time favorite YouTube channels, surprisingly. So let's just dive in. I mean, what is your background? You started off this whole YouTube channel years ago.
Yeah,
But what is your education? You have a PhD, correct?
I do. Yeah. I have an undergraduate degree in music and an undergraduate degree in computer science. So I was pretty undecided as an undergraduate as to what I wanted to do. I loved music, though. I was super passionate about it. But I'll be honest, I also loved programming and working with computers. And I would try like a semester with just one of those two, and I was miserable either way. And so I was like, well, I got to do them both then. I don't have a choice. And then I got a job in a hospital doing database work and realized I wanted to be my own boss and thought that one way to do that was to get a PhD.
Okay.
So I ended up, I originally was I wanted to learn something completely new. I felt like I already understood computer programming and I understood, some basic math and stuff like that. And I thought, I've got the skills and tools necessary to kind of teach myself statistics and data analytics. What I really want to do is learn how to do laboratory science, bench science. And so I applied to a PhD in something at the time it was called genomic sciences. Now all those techniques are kind of standard practice in any kind of like molecular biology or genetics department.
Okay.
And anyway, so I applied for that, having never ever taken a biology course since my sophomore year in high school. And I got in, I was accepted, and but I still had to like do some interviews in terms of lining up some funding for like a fellowship. And so I went for these interviews, and during the interviews they said, we've accepted you to this program, but there's this new thing called bioinformatics, and we really think that's what you should be doing. And I said, yeah, I thought about that and it looks interesting, but I can probably teach myself all that stuff. So what I want to do is this bench stuff. And they were adamant that I pursue a bioinformatics. And at the end of the day, and they were like, so have you decided to do bioinformatics? I was like, no, I've decided not to do bioinformatics. What I've decided to do is learn how to do the laboratory stuff, because you can't do that on your own. I can't do that on my own. I can't just teach myself all these techniques, have a huge laboratory in my house. But with a book and the internet, I can teach myself all the bioinformatics I'll ever need to know for the rest of my life. And they're like, okay, yeah, whatever. You're making a huge mistake. and it's funny. I drove to these interviews. At the time I was living in Charleston, South Carolina, and I was driving home, and I got halfway there. So it was about 2 hours into the drive. And I pulled over at I believe it was a Pizza Hut. And this is, to be honest, I don't think I had a cell phone. I think I used a payphone.
Mm-hmm.
And I used a payphone, and I called them and I said, okay, you win. I'll do bioinformatics. Because the realization that hit me when I was driving all alone in my car without an air conditioning or anything. So I just had the windows wide open. It was the middle of the summer, had the windows wide open, but so I couldn't hear a thing. But so I was lost in my own thoughts, and I realized that if I did not do what these people asked, they would harass me every day of my graduate school career. And I was like, yes, sure, I can do what I want, but not without a huge price in terms of being irritated the entire time. And so and so I decided that they won, and I ended up pursuing bioinformatics, and it was a fantastic choice for me, and it fit like a glove. And so so they were very wise to encourage me to do that, and even wiser to insist on it once I said no. Um, and so that worked out really well. So that's and then from there I did a postdoc at UNC, and I finally, to be honest, I finally got my my experimental bench lab or wet lab sort of experiment experience, where I got to do all kinds of experiments on mouse genetics. And I'm going to be honest with you, I hated it. It was like the most frustrating, aggravating thing I've ever done in my life. I have a huge amount of respect for the people that do it, because it is hard, and it is a cruel um, object or activity to have a love affair with, because it has no mercy at all. Experiments can fail, like 3-day long experiments that you woke up at 5 a.m. 3 days in a row and stayed in the lab till midnight. Though they can fail for a billion reasons. And at least in my position, when they would fail, I often was like, oh, I skipped this step, or something stupid, right? It was never really a learning opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things, and that drove me crazy. One of the things I love about computing and data science and anything that basically involves a computer is when there's a failure, I can almost always turn it into a learning experience. I can always feel like I'm growing and becoming better at what I do out of that failure. But with the stuff, when I was doing laboratory stuff, when I would fail, I'd be like, I, I just, I just have to do it over again.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean, and the failure rate is so high. It's like you just have to have this personality that's either completely determined that you're correct, and so you're just going to keep doing it until it works, or you just have to be completely like bubbly and upbeat, you know, an optimist in ways that like are unfathomable for most people. In order to like succeed in that field, it's brutal. It is totally brutal. There's no sort of like just easing by and squeaking by. You got to be all in.
Okay. What exactly is it? Is it just statistics applied to biology?
Bioinformatics.
Yeah.
It's a lot of different things. When I went to NC State for my PhD, North Carolina State, and at the time it was statistics applied to genetics, and it was founded. The program there was founded by Bruce Weir, who's famous for a lot of things, but he's also famous for sort of inventing the statistics behind DNA forensics, being able to calculate the probability that two or more people have these anomalies in their genome, or not anomalies, but sort of like it's based. So everybody's genome's a little different is what I'm trying to say. And when you go to when the CSI, the crime scene investigation team, shows up and they get the DNA and they collect all the DNA, they're gonna sequence that stuff, and they're gonna look at those differences between that genome and sort of any other DNA that they find at the scene, and then they can do statistics on like what's the probability that this glove and this knife came from different people, that kind of thing.
Okay. This is super fascinating. I just assume, like you go into the crime scene, you get the blood, and then it's just like this number, like this is like the simple DNA, and it's like, oh, it matches, and they just like quickly make a conclusion.
Yeah, so just like everything, there's a variety in everything, and so there's never like, there's perfect matches, but there's also a probability that someone else in the world might have a perfect match, So there's there's a lot of statistics associated that with to give people confidence that if they convict someone based on DNA evidence, that they're doing it, it's making the correct decision. That yes, that is that person who matches that DNA isn't just someone, it's probably the person who committed the crime, and it isn't just some random person. So, and what's the probability that it's the random person? Hopefully it's very small. And so he invented and sort of perfected all of those statistics. And so there was a lot of that going on when I showed up, and I was just, I'll be honest, I was like, statistics, no way am I doing that. I was like, okay, you talked me into doing bioinformatics, but I can't do the statistics things. It's too complicated. Look at the math. It's crazy. I don't want to do that. And so I avoided it the entire time. And what I did instead was I wrote computer programs that sort of modeled how different RNA molecules interact with each other.
Mhm.
And RNA, yeah. So basically, different RNA molecules can and will interact with each other, and they've got various things that attract them to each other, and various things that repel them to each other. And I wrote a computer program to simulate those attractions and those repulsions, and kind of show what's going on, and like what's the biological reason for it, and what can we use this as a tool. And specifically, I don't know how much biology you know, but like we have DNA, which are genes, and our chromosomes, which is technically, they say it's transcribed, like a specific gene, say like a gene for my hair color.
Okay.
That gene is transcribed into because the genome itself is this like, it's like a billion nucleotides. It's huge.
Yeah.
And what the cell does is it goes, well, I only need this bit. I need this little, like, you know, we need like 2,000 nucleotides instead of like billions of them. And so it'll transcribe that little bit. It's like kind of like making a photocopy. And then that copy is actually made out of RNA instead of DNA. The chromosome's made out of DNA, but the copy is made out of RNA. And then there's this thing called a ribosome that comes and it clamps onto that small messenger RNA, that copy, and it does what's called translates it. It translates that DNA, or that RNA, it translates it into protein. And the protein is the thing that actually causes the brown color of my hair. It causes the proteins do all the work.
Okay.
And so the workhorses are these proteins, and you can imagine like you're building a house, and if you ever built a house or built any buildings, you'll see that the architect's got like a stack that's this huge of like all these draftings, right? You don't need all of those all the time to like install the toilet, right? You can just take a little part of that and use that as your instructions on what to do in the bathroom. But the toilet is actually what does the work, right? You don't just leave the paper on the floor and go, this is where a toilet goes. So you can imagine, like, that's the process of going from DNA, which is the original stack of drafting documents that the architect comes up. The RNA is like a small piece of that. That's just needed for building a certain part of the building, and the protein is the toilet seat.
Okay.
And so anyways, what's interesting to me is this process of translating this small part of the plan into an actual toilet seat is it's dependent on these RNA interactions, and that both molecules have RNA as part of them, and they require some binding in order to work, and they have to bind to each other approximately every 3 nucleotides. So imagine sort of a ratchet system that bumps 3 down every step of the operation. And I was able to show how we can use that to automatically annotate genomes. Like, you can look at a genome, and I could simulate the interactions of these molecules. And I could show you, once I start seeing these binding patterns every 3 base pairs, I can start showing you where the genes are in that genome. If it's unannotated, I can say, oh, there's probably a gene there because we're getting these 3 base pair signals. And in regions where we're not, I'll go, oh, it's probably something in between. And I was able to like use that tool to update a bunch of genomes. And it was a lot of fun. And I really liked it, but it had nothing to do with statistics. Absolutely nothing to do with statistics. However, when I got my first job, I got a postdoc. At this point, I was like, I'm going to become a professor.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, and in order to become a professor, you have to go do a postdoc. And so I got a postdoc, and they were like, and the guy who ran the lab was a great dude. And he was like, I just want to do an experiment, and you are the experiment. He's like, everyone in this lab does, genetics bench work. They do experimental stuff. I've never had an analytical person in the lab. I just want to see what happens. and one of the things that happens is, personality wise, I really like to help people. That's something I get a lot of satisfaction from. I just love helping people. And so I'd poke around the lab and I go, hey, what are you doing? And he'd be like, I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. And then I'd be like, I could help you do some. I knew how, even though I hated statistics at that point, I at least knew how to do a t-test by the time I got this job. And I was like, I could probably do a little statistics for you if you needed. And they were like, are you kidding me? I hate statistics more than everything in my life. And I was like, it's just a t-test. And they're like, oh, that'd be so awesome. So I started doing like little t-tests for people and drawing little graphs for people around in the lab. And it kind of built on that. And sooner or later, I was like inventing new statistical tests. And I was like, actually I had to know what this stuff was, and I had to know how to do it. And so I was teaching myself as best I could, and thinking really hard about, to be honest, how to teach my coworkers. Because partly teaching my coworkers was my way of teaching myself and making sure that I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also a way to make them realize that what I was doing wasn't magic. And it also made me confident that if they went to some conference and they said, and someone was like, well, what does the p-value mean? They would say something reasonable in response to that question, and not something really stupid. And so I was like, I got to explain this stuff to these people. They got to know. And so, so that's when I finally started learning statistics, and also sort of like learning how to explain statistics sort of happened at that juncture.
Okay, very cool. So how long ago did you start the YouTube channel? Like, where did this play into the timing of all this?
Yeah, so I was at that job for a long time, but about maybe 6 years ago, I started the YouTube channel, and the goal, I was still in the lab, and the goal was to create, because it was an academic lab, and there was people coming all the time to the lab, and I was doing these little seminars for the people in the lab, but there was 2 problems with that. One was new people coming every 6 months, and that meant I had to give the same seminar every 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a lazy person, and if I can do something once and then never have to do it again for the rest of my life, that sounds awesome. And the idea of like, oh, I have to give this seminar like every 6 months forever. So that's one motivating factor right there, like laziness. And then the other one was, when you teach a class or you give a seminar or whatever, you're teaching people stuff, regardless of whether they actually need to know it right then and there. And it could be like you teach someone how to do a t-test, and then like they don't need to actually do a t-test for another 8 months. And by then they've forgotten everything you've said. Mm-hmm. And I was like, the thing I like about YouTube was, 1, it lets me be lazy, and 2, it lets me teach when people need to know rather than when it's convenient for me to teach. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And so I started making videos and putting them on YouTube. And these were, the idea was I was just trying to make my life easier in the lab. And so in the first year, I got 9 views, and that was awesome. That was a huge success because it meant that there were 9 people in the lab. 9 of my coworkers had like, well, let me learn something. And even better, they didn't tell me about it, which meant that I must have done a good enough job that they didn't have questions, that they were like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
That's what I was telling myself, I could have been wrong, but that's what I was like, holy smokes. So I was like, yeah, let's do a happy dance. And I was really pleased with how that was going. And then it just so happened that other people started watching those videos as well. And it got to the point where um, I realized that I hated research. Yeah, I don't hate research. It's just not for me. Research doesn't. I love it. It doesn't like me. I mean, I'll be honest. It's just not. Research is great, and it's important, and people need to do it, and I loved supporting it. But I had no interest in my own research. Like they're like, oh, write a grant of something you want to do for the next 6 years, and I'd be like, oh, do I have to? I'll tell you what I want to do for the next 6 years. I just want to help everyone around me. And they were
Yeah.
like, no, that's not how it works in academics. You don't get a job helping other people. You get a job starting your own lab, hiring people, teaching students, mentoring, blah, blah, blah. You got your own research program. And I'm like, I just want to help people. And I think I'm doing it. And they were like, yeah, it's good. But it kind of turned out that I did such a good job helping people that they didn't need my help anymore, which is good, but it also meant like I had to have that talk with my boss. And that talk with my boss was he's like, you got to start your own research program because he's like, he's like, I'm not complaining. You've done some great stuff here. You've helped out a lot of people, and we've done a lot of great publications and all those things you're supposed to be doing in an academic. We did that, and you helped, and you played a pivotal role in that. But the people, there's the people in the lab aren't utilizing you as much as they used to because they now they know how to do all this stuff, and that was great. That was a success. And so he's like, but so you either need to do research or you need to find something new to do. And so that's when I sort of just jumped off the cliff and started doing YouTube. And it was very, very, very scary because I am not one to take career risks. But I did it, and it scared me to death because I wasn't making hardly any. I made a little bit of money from YouTube, but like pennies. I did the math, and I was making, I've got a PhD, so I'm relatively well educated. I was making less than someone who bags groceries. Um, and and I'm not 22 anymore. I've got a mortgage. I've got like expenses and things like that. And I had saved up some money. And so the plan was this. I've got enough money that even if I don't succeed at YouTube, I can pay all my bills for the year. I can't go on crazy vacations. I can't do a lot of things. I've got to live relatively frugally. Not that I ever go on crazy vacations, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I had enough money that I could like pay the bills. I could pay the mortgage. I could get groceries. I could bag them myself. And I would make it through the year one way or the other. And so the goal was to see if I could get it to where I didn't have to live off my savings by the end of the year. And unfortunately I did, and it was very scary. And I initially made a big mistake in thinking like, well, I have to make money, so let's do consulting, and which makes a lot of money. You can do really well consulting, and that's great. But the whole reason I quit wasn't to be a consultant. The whole reason I quit was to do StatQuest. And I was like, this is not going to work. I'm making money. I'm paying the bills. But the whole reason I left my job was because I wanted to do StatQuest, and I'm not doing StatQuest. So I stopped doing consulting. And I was like, no, you have to make money doing StatQuest and StatQuest related activities. And so then I was like, well, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And so I started doing a little bit of webinars, like teaching some coding. And what I did is I made these little study guides, these little PDF study guides on various techniques. And so you'd watch a video on PCA, and there'd be a little thing like, you can buy a PDF study guide for $3 on my website here. And people started buying those. And it's not that I made a ton of money, but all of a sudden I went from not enough to enough. I didn't have to rely on my savings at that point. And then I was like, okay, I can do this.
How big was the channel when you left your job in the lab? Do you remember like around how many subscribers you had?
I mean, I think I was probably a little over 100,000 subscribers.
Okay.
Uh, um,
I've heard that's like a critical number. Like once you start breaking the 100,000 point, then you can kind of start getting a little momentum with it.
yeah, I mean, yes
You're
and
obviously doing
no.
you're obviously doing the right thing at that point if you've got
Yeah,
100,000.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Does it make it get easier? I don't know about that. I feel like I'm still just, I mean, I'm not necessarily scraping by. And one of the reasons that why that is true is once I did those study guides, I suddenly realized that I could actually use those study guides as a foundation for writing a book. And that also helped as well. So and I'm also I sell t-shirts. I went from having like a normal stable job to having this job that has all these like random revenue streams from all over the place. um so when I add it all up together, I'm like, okay, that's enough money, but any single thing is sort of like, I don't know if that's going to cut it. But yeah, it's like I got merchandise, I've got t-shirts, I got books, I've got study guides, I've got Jupyter notebooks, I've got some ad revenue from YouTube. And I also have Patreon, which is fantastic. And I have membership. So I mean, it's sort of like a patronage thing where people they like what I do, so they donate some money to the cause, and that gives me a little bit of freedom to spend more time doing the StatQuest stuff. So you can add it all together, and it kind of works out in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I consider myself a YouTube hobbyist.
Uh-huh.
So my channel's 25,000. I've been
Wow,
doing it
that's huge.
since, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
doing it since 2018, but mine's so niche. I try
Yeah.
to stay in my lanes of just quantitative finance.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so it's been a slow grow, but I watch, all the channels on how to grow your channel and get the multiple streams. And everyone says the same thing, right? You're not going to get rich off of the ads. You're not going to get rich off of the merchandise. But if you can
You're not gonna get rich. I hope they're saying that too.
I think they skip that part because I always watch them and it's always like, oh, you could make, $1 million just like the beast or just like, someone big on like Casey Neistat. And I'm like, I mean, you could, but I mean, we're in a technical field. It's not like I just don't imagine many people, sitting on a weekend or something on their phone being like, oh, exciting,
Yeah, that's right. I mean, exactly. In fact, I don't know what your metrics, but I get to see the analytics that YouTube gives me for my videos, and I can tell you with certainty, a very high confidence, that people do not watch my videos on the weekends. They watch, but it's perfect because my original idea was I was going to make videos that people watched when they needed to know them. And that is exactly what they do. They watch them when they need to know them. And so that's why they're not watching them on the weekends, because on the weekends they're watching football or they're mowing their lawns, they're taking naps. They're not, they're doing other things. But during their work week, when they're doing their work and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to do this, or I got to do that, or I got to do this kind of clustering. That's when people watch my videos, and I feel like, wow, what a success. But yeah, it does mean you and I are a little bit on the niche side. But I'll be honest, 25,000 plus subscribers in a niche is amazing. I mean, that's just bonkers. That's a huge niche all of a sudden. That's not just like 50 people. That's 25,000 people. That's enough to fill some arenas.
Yeah. Yeah. I started doing the math when I started it. And I was like, all right, I was kind of like you. The first year, I think I had it's like 50 subscribers or something in a year. And I was like, man, that's more than like a classroom of students. And then, yeah, as it starts expanding, you're like,
Yeah.
1,000 views. That's like, starting to like do in my head, like how many kids were in high school and how many kids were in college. And
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's a big crowd. And so it's very impressive. And yeah, that's cool. Hooray.
yeah. And I could definitely relate with your channel's timing of it because for us, so I work in quantitative finance, just doing stats and math. And
Yeah.
it's always like some topic comes up and it's like, in my head, I know how to do it, and I don't have the time to explain it to somebody. And then I'm like, oh, just I have a StatsQuest video on. I was like, just go check out this channel. He's got it figured out. He's got really nice, pretty graphics. You'll understand it in 10 minutes. They always kind of look at me skeptically, thinking, oh, this is going to be a little too complicated. And then they come back and go, I've got it figured out. But yeah, we're watching it like Monday to Friday. We're not doing this on
Yeah,
Saturdays.
you do it when you need to know it, and I love it. I love that it's like a tool. It's like a reference book. It's just, I don't know. I feel like that's, in some ways, that's the way more education needs to be. Sort of like, not just like we're going to stuff your head full of stuff, but we're going to let you do what you got to do, and when you need it, it's there.
Yeah. So I got to ask you the famous question, which I'm not sure if anyone else has asked you. Where did the BAM come from?
Yeah. So I make videos on statistics. Maybe not the most exciting topic on the planet, but I'm enthusiastic and energetic about it because I think it's interesting. But I know that it's not like super sexy or whatever, and I know that like I'm excited about it, but I know a lot of people are not excited about it. And just saying "bam" is a way to like make it seem more exciting than people might think it is. There used to be a long time ago, there used to be a TV chef called Emeril Lagasse.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, when I grew up watching TV chef, there's like Julia Child, and there's a bunch of like the Cajun chef, and there was all these people on the TV. But it was never very exciting. And then Emeril showed up. And he cooked in New Orleans, and he had a live jazz band, and he would always like add some spices to whatever he's making. And whenever he added his spice, he'd go, bam. And he's like, we're going to kick this up a notch. And he like, from around the back, he would throw the spice onto the dish, and he'd go, bam. And I was like, yeah. And so when I was teaching statistics, I'd go, bam. And then, but then I was like, well, bam is awesome, but where do you go from there? I mean, are we done? Are we done with bam? Is that the end of the road, and you just have to get off the bus and then walk home? And I was like, no, double bam. I was like, holy smokes, the road keeps going, and we can keep, and then I discovered through trial and error that there's also triple bam. And triple bam, I've discovered, is the sweet spot, because what it says is we've discussed three main ideas,
mm-hmm.
and I've realized that when you want to have more bams, that's great, that's awesome, and I'm really excited that you're still going and you're still trucking, but it's possible you're covering too much material in one little video. You haven't really. It's good to have, just in my opinion, it's good to just have three main concepts, because otherwise these videos just go on and on and on forever. But two bams is okay, but it's like, you probably could have said a little bit more, and there might be a little bit more there. And I feel like the three bam thing is a good way of judging like how much content I have in a video. Is there enough? Is it too much? Is it just right? And if it's got three bams, it's probably just right.
Okay. I love it. So I started watching your channel. Quant finance, my whole industry is very like snooty and like everything. And so I watched them and I was like, I don't know. And the BAM thing. And now when I watch it, I love it because I feel like the BAM thing is like, it highlights the point of like, we've reached an ending point. Like, you need to understand this piece right here.
That's right.
So in my channel, I suck. I explain everything and I'm like, all right, I think I'm good. And then people come back and they're like, I got lost somewhere in the middle. And I'm like, I watched yours and I'm like, it's like that BAM piece is what really sets, like, this is the first idea.
Yeah.
Hit the conclusion. If you're lost at this point, you should probably go back a little bit. And then, then you have the second BAM and the third BAM.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good. They're milestones. Yeah. And they're also sort of like, to me, there's some dramatic, I when I make my videos, it's statistics, but I do like to have some drama about what I'm doing. And so I like to start with a problem. So I basically use the same plot structure that most rom-coms use, where you start off like everything's great, hooray, and the couple gets together and you're like, this is awesome. But then like something pulls them apart, and there's a problem that needs to be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the movie consists of the people like going off on their own and learning new things about themselves and about each other. And then eventually they get back together, and the movie, it's like, oh, thank God, and you're just happy, and the movie's over. And I try to use a similar philosophy with my videos, where we start off with a problem, well, we start off everything's working, but then like I introduce something that can't be solved with the tools that we already have. And you're like, oh no, what are we going to do? And so we start talking about sort of the concepts of what's going on. What are the concepts? And that's usually like, once we understand the concepts, that's a bam. That's a big step. That's a big conceptual thing. That's a bam. And then the next thing is we kind of get lost. We start going into nitty gritty details, and we may have like gotten most of the way there in terms of the details of covering everything. And that's a double bam stage, once you're understanding some of the details. But then we bring everything together and we see how it all works in the big picture. We might run through an example of some data, and we can verify that everything we learned worked. And that is the triple bam moment where like the couple finally comes back together, and it's like Jennifer Lopez and whoever, someone else, doesn't matter, because it's just Jennifer Lopez. That's all you need for it to be a rom-com. And it's just credits rolling, so.
Do you ever get lost in the planning of going down rabbit holes? Like for me, I get really excited. I'm like, I'm going to make this video. I know that people are having this problem. And then the statistics in me just starts going down the rabbit hole of like, well, you need to know this idea and you need to know this idea. And I know some of your videos, you'll point to say like the beginning, you don't know this idea, please decision trees here.
Yeah. So that happens all the time. And usually what happens is, I remember this specifically when I was doing my video on logistic regression. I was like, oh, I'm going to do a video on logistic regression. That'll be easy. Bam, no big deal. And then I was like, yeah, but to do logistic, and I was doing the video on logistic regression, and it had like this 300 slide section that was just all about odds and log odds ratios. And I was like, this is like 12 BAMs right here. And I pulled that out and I made four videos. Each one got 3 BAMs. So it was 12 BAMs worth of stuff. And then the logistic regression video shrunk down to just about 3 BAMs. But yeah, that's what happens is as I go down those rabbit holes, and I'm not afraid to go there, because usually what that means is I just need to pull that out and make it a separate video. And so when you finally get to see my logistic regression video, it goes, make sure you understand the odds, the log odds ratios, and all these other videos, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of funny because like the joke around me is, because I'm talking to my friends about what I do. And the joke is always, I show up and I go, this StatQuest is taking a little longer than I was expecting to. And they're like, yeah, they always do, because you always end up in a rabbit hole trying to explain like 10 things instead of just the one thing you wanted to.
I understand that pain. My subscribers can attest to this. I've been working on a Udemy course for probably over 2 years now. And it's always like, it's coming out. Guys, I'm going to build this course. It'll be here. Give me 6 months. It'll be here.
Yeah.
It started kind of like that. I started off like, I'm going to teach the entire field.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not going to work. So I'm like scaling it back. And now I'm down into like, all right, I'm just going to do distributions. We're just going to make a series on like, parametrics and non-parametrics and kernel density estimation. And I'm like, so then now I'm starting to do them and starting to upload a few videos onto Udemy and getting it kind of prepared. And then I'm like, I've got to keep scaling back further and further.
Yeah. That happened to me when I outlined my book. My book was going to like take over the world and cover everything that was known to man. And then I was like, I've written 300 pages.
Because how many pages is your book now? Okay, it's right at like 300.
Yeah, it's just over 300 pages. And I was like, there's a million topics that I did not cover, but 300 pages is enough, and we can always do like, I can always do the StatQuest that's the StatQuest illustrated guide to machine learning. Mm-hmm. But in the future, There will be the StatQuest Illustrated Guide to Tree-Based Learning. There will be the StatQuest Illustrated Guide to Deep Learning. There's going to be lots more illustrated guides, and I'll just crank them out every couple of years is sort of the plan. Try to keep them all, roughly 300 pages, because I can do that in a year. Any longer, and it's going to take. I feel like the work on the book sort of grows exponentially. So adding 50 pages to a 300-page book, it adds a lot more work than, say, the initial 50 pages. Because just editing and revising and just keeping track of all the things just gets more and more complicated the more the book gets bigger. So I'm trying to keep them around 300 pages, just because I know that I can do that, and it'll get done. And so that's what's going on there.
Okay. I love it. I bought the book. I was like, I saw you posted it, and I was like, I have no idea what this book's going to look like. Because in my head, I'm thinking like statistics is going to be like a textbook, and it's going to be very formal. And then, of course, I ordered the book, and I just crack it open, and I'm like, it's perfect. It's exactly what I need to get like to the answer I need quickly. And this has to be the first illustrated technical book I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Which I love. I love it. It's like I can just go in and I'm like, oh, gradient descent, main ideas.
Yeah.
You can just get to it quickly.
Yeah, I'm so pleased. Yeah, that was the whole idea. Was like, I was like, this is going to be a book for everybody. If you're starting out, just read it cover to cover. If you've been there a long time, just open to your favorite section, and the first page says whatever it is: neural networks, main ideas, logistic regression, main ideas. You just look at that one page, and you're like, bam, I'm good to go. And yeah, I'm really proud of that book.
Yeah, no, I love it. I don't know why in my head I'm thinking like, oh, he's gonna write some really technical book.
No,
it's gonna be really complicated. And then I'm like, I looked through the book and I was reading it. And I was like, this is like literally taking the videos, putting them into book format. Yeah. But for me, it's better. I'm a book person. Reading things online. I have to get like the physical copies of textbooks, even when they're free.
Yeah,
like, highlight and take notes in them. So yeah, I just love it. I think I like the fact that you make it so that it's like a junior person without a super complicated math background is going to pick this up and read it and go, well, of course, that's exactly how a K-means works. Of course, that's how you would do it.
Yeah.
Where I feel like a lot of textbooks, I've got some of the main ones, like the Bishop textbook.
Yeah.
It's just like dense reading. And then there's like a bunch of math equations, and then it's more dense reading. And then I get frustrated with people that work for me, or people in the industry, and I'm trying to explain to them, there's this one line in the text and it says this, and this is critical, and you need this, and they're like glazed over, like, that was class 10 years ago. I don't care, just give me the answer real quick.
Yeah. I wrote the textbook that I always wanted, rather than the textbook that was already there, because there's tons of those technical math heavy books that are hard to read. There's enough of those.
Yeah.
I don't need to write another one. So I wanted to write one that would be really different and kind of not just unique, but like the kind of thing that that would help me and I would want to read. So
yeah. So when you did the self-learning process here, right, because you've self-taught a lot of this as well, is there any like favorite resources or methods that you use to kind of self-learn? I know a lot of people message me and like, what's the secret? And I'm like, I just read a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Watch a lot of videos.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's what I do. I read a lot of stuff. I don't, to be honest, I don't actually watch videos, but partly because I'm afraid that if I do, I'll just copy other people, and I don't want to do that. I want to at least bring a unique voice, a different voice to the table, because, because the original idea I had for my own StatQuest or my own videos was that people would come to me because whatever they did first didn't work, and so if all I did was repeat what other people said, then I wouldn't be able to help those people that weren't helped originally by the first thing that they saw or whatever. And so I wanted to have a really different approach, and so that with the hope that if one thing works for them, then they don't need to watch my videos at all. But if it doesn't work, that whatever their class they were taking, the textbook they were reading, or whatever other video they were looking at, if that didn't work for them, they could come to me and they would get a whole different approach that might, and hopefully would solve that problem. And so I don't watch other people's videos, but I do read everything I can. And I I think it's important to say that you don't just read everything, but I don't understand any of it. It doesn't make any sense to me, because I think a lot of people think I just sit down and I look at an equation, I go, yeah, I got it. No, it never works that way. I look at the equation, I go, oh, this is going to be tough. And I'll read everything I can about the topic, and I might not understand any of it. And I'll despair. I'll be like, okay, Starmer, this is the one you can't figure out. This is the one that beats you down, and you're not going to get this one. And I go, okay, well, I didn't understand a single thing. But I guess what? I saw this term, bootstrapping. I saw bootstrapping show up like 50 times in this thing. And so I better learn about bootstrapping. And so I'd be like, okay, so, and this is that rabbit hole we're going down. I'm like, well, I'll learn about bootstrapping, and I'll read a bunch about bootstrapping, and I'll be like, man, there's a lot of confusing things about there, because they're talking about asymptotic, convergences and things like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, where does that go? But I'll go, well, whatever. I'm seeing these terms. I don't understand what any of it means, but I'm seeing these terms come up a bunch, and that gives me places to focus. And sooner or later, I'll get to a point where something makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
A little nugget. It was like, I think I understand this one little piece of this big, huge puzzle. And when I understand that one little piece, I'll go back to the beginning and I'll read everything again. And that didn't make any sense and made me despair and made me think that I was never going to get it. And in contrast to the first time I saw it, the second time I see it, it starts making more sense, because I had this little nugget to build off of. And then I start building more and more stuff on that nugget. And eventually I sort of, but not really understand it. And I know that I sort of, but not really understand it, because at this point, I'm ready to write a program that either implements it or uses some library that somebody else has implemented. And I know enough that I can take a wild guess about what the output should be. I've got my little simple data set, and I know enough that given this simple data set, the output should be this. And so I run it through the algorithm, and I get something completely different. And that's when I'm like, yeah, okay, I must not actually understand what's going on. But again, I have to ask myself, why not? What did I miss? What am I missing? Why is this different? And it gives me a way to focus. And usually once I'm at that stage, I'm kind of on the home stretch. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know I'm going to succeed. And I figure it out from there. But it is sort of an exhausting kind of marathon path, full of self-doubt and full of imposter syndrome of like, I can't do this, I'm not smart enough, and all those things. But I eventually, almost always, I don't always, but almost always, I get it. And I'm at the stage now that I can remind myself, like, Starmer, you've been here before, you can do this, you just got to keep going and you'll figure it out. Just don't give up. Don't give up. But that's the advice I would give to anyone trying to learn something or to self-teach themselves, is don't give up, ever. You just got to keep going back. And for me, not giving up meant, for PCEA, I spent 2 years on that one, going back, trying to understand it more, looking at the math and going, I still don't get it. And going back. And finally I was like, oh, I got it. And it just took years. I mean, literally took years to get it. So it's sort of, you have to be patient, you have to be determined.
Yeah, it's definitely an iterative process of, I mean, I saw this YouTube video of some mathematician who's renowned or something, and I'm watching him, and of course all of it's going over my head. And somebody asked him, like, how do you read textbooks? And he goes, oh, I have a PhD in math and I've got like 100 and something publications. And he's going on about it. And he goes, and I read the textbooks, and he goes, I understand maybe 5%.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's like, I got to reread it again. And then I got to think about it. And I'm like, okay. I was like, so I'm not just like the person that has to do this iterative process, but it's definitely a grinding thing.
Yeah.
You start out, you have to have the goal, but you definitely have to stick with doing that. I think working in the industry for me was one of those areas where I figured a lot of it out just because it was like, kind of that process. You're thrown in, you need to build a model to do this.
Yeah.
And then it's like you're just failing left and right, but at least you're like, I don't understand this term. So you're running
Yeah.
down over here to look this up and then trying to get to that final point.
Yeah. You just have to, that's exactly right. You just have to grind away, grind away every day, just chipping away. And you can't ever let up. And sooner or later you'll figure it out. And when you do, it's like the best feeling ever,
Yeah, definitely.
I just love that. It's so exciting.
So how did your music career play into all this? Because I know you do little tunes too that go with the videos. And I didn't even know you had a music background. And I'm looking you up on LinkedIn and I'm like, oh, he actually does have the music degree too. Do you just try to keep that in there for like entertainment, or do you just try to stay up on top of your music? Or
Yeah, so I love music. I'm super passionate about music. It's important to me. It's always been part of my life, and it is today. And like I was saying early on, um, whenever I did just computer stuff without music, um, I just wasn't happy. And so music is a critical part of my life. Uh, and so I always do music. I have silly songs, and those legitimately are silly songs. But I've also, I was like, semi-pro professional musician for a while and did a lot of touring and a lot of,
wow.
I've played some pretty big shows in my day. I did some stuff with REM back when they were a band.
My
I've done,
era. So yeah.
yeah, I've done some like top shelf, music experiences, and that's super fun. Um, and played with some amazing performers, um, and so I've been very fortunate in that area. Um, but to me, it's all part of just balancing out who I am and keeping myself happy. Music is great. I've tried doing it 100%, and like I said, that too is also depressing and no fun at all. And so I love being able to do a little bit of both. But I do start my videos with a silly song. But I also write and record songs on my own, and I used to get commissions for soundtrack work and sort of performance works. Um, and now I just kind of focus on my own music, and I don't hustle the music as much as I used to, just because YouTube is now taking up almost all of my time. It's like, I work on it all day, and then I have dinner, and then I just keep working on it. And I don't have a lot of time to really hustle in music the way I used to, which is fine. Things change. But it's still part of what I do every day. And I keep my ukulele right here, and I sing lots of silly songs, but I also play, songs that, I would claim are a little more serious as well. And I keep all that as part of what I do. Just because it's the only way I can keep myself happy.
Yeah, I completely understand. I'm in that position where it's like I have the job, then I've got the family and the personal things going on, and then I've got YouTube on the side, and it's like I need all three pieces to keep me like afloat.
Yeah.
And like people have suggested, like, Dimitri, you're super stressed out, you're running teams, just stop doing YouTube. And I'm like, I could, but it's
Yeah.
like the podcast for me when I do my solo ones, like me just venting about
Yeah.
things in life. And then like, there's pieces of me that's like I need the work piece because it drives me and gives me new problems and ideas to explore. And then of course you need a personal life of hobbies and interests that are not math and stats related, and something that kind of just keeps you sane.
Yeah. Balances you out. Yeah.
So what instruments do you play? Do you mean, I'm guessing, the full spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I do play a lot of different instruments. I am partial to four-stringed instruments, and the ukulele has four strings. I grew up playing the cello, and to be honest, that's where I had most of my success as a musician, was as a cello player. That's what I'd go on tour all over the country playing cello, um, with various rock and roll bands in various capacities. And that was super fun. So the cello is sort of my true love. It's always been there for me, and it's still there, and I love it. Um, But lately I've been playing the ukulele, and I also have something called a tenor guitar, which is a 4-stringed guitar.
Okay.
And I love playing those as well. So it's
It,
I'm a yeah.
what does it sound like? I've played acoustic and electric for when I was a kid. I took lessons and then I just one of these weird hobbies I just do in the
Hold.
closet.
So here's the tenor guitar you see,
Okay.
4 strings. Um, so a normal guitar is tuned in fourths, predominantly. A tenor guitar is tuned in fifths, and so a little out of tune. It's a little what that does is it makes the chords sound a little bit more open. Are you familiar with Aaron Copland, the composer? Are you familiar with him?
No.
He wrote a lot of music that has this distinct American sound. And everyone's like, oh, it just sounds like the Great West, the prairies and things like that. And a lot of what that is the chords are these relatively open voiced chords, whereas on a guitar, because the strings are pitch wise closer together,
Mm-hmm.
the chords are a little tighter and a little richer in the middle, whereas on a tenor instrument, you get that's just the notes end up being more spread apart and a little more open and just sounding a little, and you end up with a lot of fifths, and because it's tuned in fifths, and people associate those open fifths with sort of like the American prairie and the American West.
Okay.
One thing that's cool about the tenor is it's tuned to the same note names an octave higher as the cello. So a lot of the stuff I do on the cello, a lot of stuff I can do on the cello, I can just pull up and do it also on the tenor guitar. So it's kind of fun.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
I can see like when you're playing it, like in my mind, I'm hearing like more of like a cello stringed
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
composition. Yeah, from that perspective of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I just so those are probably the 3 instruments I play the most: the ukulele, the tenor guitar, and the cello. But I play a little bit of everything, and if I can get my hands on it, I'll play it.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
understand that. So to wrap this up here, let's just do one final question on what advice would you give for students? I don't even know if I'd say interested in statistics, but are required to do statistics.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them as an outlook?
If they're required to do statistics, and they don't already love it, um, the thing I would say is, the world we live in is imperfect, and that's good and bad. It's bad in that I guess we want things to be perfect, but it's good in that it means there's always variety. If I look at a tree, it's going to have different number of leaves as the tree next to it. When I order French fries, I'm going to get a different number of French fries than I did yesterday, and I might get more French fries than I got yesterday, and that's exciting. Everyone is different all the time, and nothing is constant. You take a typical standard math class, they'll tell you that 2 plus 2 equals 4, and it always equals 4, and that 4 is always the same. And that's great. That's like math in heaven. That's what happens in heaven. But on earth, things are different. Say like I asked you to measure a 2-foot length of string, and I got somebody else to measure another 2-foot length of string, and then I combined those two 2 feet lengths of string, I would get approximately a 4-foot length of string. Would it be exactly 4 feet down to the most infinitesimal decimal point? Would it be super precise? Probably not. It might be a little longer than the ideal 4-foot measurement, or a little shorter than the ideal 4-foot measurement. And that's just because it could be a lot of things. It could be just that they didn't have a very good ruler to begin with. It could have been they were a little sloppy with the scissors. It could have been that the string got humid and shrunk a little bit. So and then say like I got other people to do it. And they would measure out 2 feet, and they had they were maybe a little sloppy in a different way, or maybe they were even more careful. And I added up, I'm going to get a different 4-foot measurement than I got from the first person. Statistic, that's reality. Math says 2 + 2 = 4, and 4 is the same thing every time. That's what happens in heaven. On earth, when we take these 2 units of measurement, we add them together, we're going to get different things every single time. And that's just the reality of life on earth and all the imperfections and the variation we have in our life. Now, what I love about statistics is it's the math of that, and not the math of heaven. It's the math of the earth. And it's also, not only is it like help us understand the world we live in, it helps us make the right decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I've got some people that are constantly cutting these 2-foot long segments and, being really precise, and I add them together, I'm going to have a little bit of variation in my 4-foot thing, but not a lot. And I can be confident that those people are going to keep doing that. Whereas when I see, I got some sloppy people and they have terrible measuring devices and they're doing the best they can, but their scissors are dull and maybe their ruler's off, a little bit. It's not super precise. And every time they do it, I get a lot of variation in what ends up being, the 4-foot thing. I can have less confidence that I'll get like the same thing every time. And statistics is what helps us make those decisions, being able to look at that variation, quantify it, and understand what it means about the future. So that's what I would say to anyone who's maybe their heart is not in statistics and they're not excited about statistics. They should be, because nothing else tries to capture reality and understand reality in this way. Everything else sort of treats reality as if it's just an inconvenience, and that the real numbers and the real math happens in heaven, and that's just not the way it is.
Yeah, definitely agree. Well, Josh, thank you for coming on. It's been a blast. I've learned a lot from you. I'm hoping a lot of people watching have got some little insights into your channel as well.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. It's been a blast. I've really enjoyed myself, and it's been great talking to you, Dimitri.